and welcome to Digital Discussions presented by Peaky Digital. My name is Rachael and today I am your host and we are joined by Jamie.
Hello.
Hello, welcome to the podcast, Jamie.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So, Jamie, before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's podcast, I'm going to ease you in with a couple of starter questions.
Okay.
Warm you up.
Hit me.
Get us going. So, Jamie, what is your role here at Peaky? Tell us a bit about yourself, your background and your role.
Sure. So I'm the SEO manager at Peaky Digital. I've been working in SEO it's my 10th year this year, in fact.
Congrats.
So I'm going to throw a party for myself and Google things, basically. But so I started out as a journalist and it was sort of right around the time that print medium was very difficult to monetize. So there were basically no jobs in it, but marketing, there is always a need for marketing. And it was just when search engines kind of became a bit more hip to the idea that if we write good content, then more people would come to our websites, really, and making it more focused around that. So there was a bit of an appetite for people that could write at the time, so I got into marketing that way. I've worked in-house and in agency in a few places over the years and sort of building up the skills there, really. So it was, even though I started in content, moved over more to the technical understanding of it and then sort of seeing how the two marry up and how they work together. So that's what brings me here to Peaky and rolling on a year and a half now, I think.
And your role here at Peaky is?
I'm the SEO manager.
SEO manager.
SEO manager, yeah.
Super.
Look at me, Mum and Dad. They don't know what SEO is. They don't know what my job is.
I know. I think there's a few of us who go home and have those conversations at the end of the day. But hey.
My fun story, because one of my previous jobs, they required me to have a business insurance for my car to drive to and from places. My mum thought I was a chauffeur, which is not a job I've ever done. So that's not what SEO is. That is not what my job is.
Since starting at Peaky, I've definitely had numerous conversations about what is social media. You know, what are PPC? Okay, yeah. So, keeping us sort of on the warm up, Jamie, I'm almost scared to ask this, but what is your favourite film?
This is one of those questions I pain about fairly regularly. And I think at the moment I've sort of come to the realization in life that my favourite film is the original Italian Job.
Okay.
The Michael Caine one. And even though the new one is, or the 22-year-old one now is fine, the original one ticks all the boxes for me. And great one for cars, not just the minis.
Yeah.
Starts off with a Lamborghini Miura. You've got E-Types, Aston Martin DB4, 10 out of 10, good film.
I'm so relieved. I thought you were going to say something completely obscure that I was never going to have heard of.
In this day and age, the number of people that haven't heard of or don't know the original Italian Job, it could be
This is true. People think the second one is the original one.
Oh, the Mark Wahlberg film? No,
Wahlberg,
absolutely not. That is not my favourite film. How dare you?
Two different things. Very different
things.
So here at Peaky, we have a lot of lunch and learns, right? We like our food as a team. Any excuse to eat together, eat at all, criticise each other's lunches. We love our food. So Jamie, if you were in charge of our next lunch and learn, and you were picking the takeaway, you could pick any takeaway, what would you inflict on us?
Oh, I think if I were choosing food for me, it would be different to what I'd choose for the team. I mean, last time when we tried to do Chinese food, I was insisting that people would love stuffed crab claws. And I think everyone thought less of me that day, having tried them out for themselves. It was an educational day. Yeah, well, that was the learn part of a lunch and learn. But I mean, we're pretty lucky here in Falmouth, really, that there aren't really any bad choices. I mean, pizza's always a winner. Anything not from the big chains really is welcome. So.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have lots of great independents around us. Mm-hmm. Super. So getting into the nitty gritty a bit more, today we're going to talk about the fundamentals of SEO. And for anyone who doesn't know much about Peaky, is maybe joining us for the first time, I'm Peaky's client services manager, so my understanding of SEO is still relatively basic, and I'm getting there slowly. I'm certainly no SEO specialist. So for the purpose of today's podcast, we've introduced a new feature, and that is our jargon bell.
Yep. Which always has said jargon on it. Amazing they sell them looking like
Definitely
that. But
only says jargon.
Yep.
So for the benefit of today's podcast, every time you get too nerdy or there is something that I don't understand, I think maybe those joining us might not understand, I'm going to hit this jargon bell, and maybe we'll revisit what's been said.
It might get used a lot.
I might just be banging it the whole way through. So to really kick us off, Jamie, the big question, what is SEO?
So, SEO, for those of you playing at home, stands for Search Engine Optimization. And it is such a wide-reaching, all-encompassing term, I mean, when it started off, it was a bit of a dirty word in the industry. It was hiding words on a page so that people couldn't actually see it, but search engines read it. It was buying links to your website from other people's, that kind of thing. And again, it was very much a process of not creating good things, not creating stuff that people actually wanted to see. It was just getting around Google's way of making things appear, and just doing whatever it took, really. And as a result, there were some terrible websites out there, and early 2000s websites, the kind of stuff that would appear on Google was good for no one, basically. So that was sort of early SEO, and at the center of it, the goal has remained the same, which is getting websites to show up when people search for things on. The temptation is always to say Google. In reality, SEO can be all sorts of things. I mean, not just other search engines. So you've got DuckDuckGo, you've got Bing, of course. But it can be anything, really. So anything that uses a search engine. I mean, YouTube is technically the second biggest search engine. So making sure that videos appear not just in Google, but also that they appear in YouTube as well. There are things we can do to help influence that. So in short, SEO is basically making sure that your website does the right things and says the right things, that Google and other search engines are happy that your website answers their question that people are looking for. So that's it in a nutshell. A big nutshell.
Didn't even need the jargon bell, so we're off to a good start.
You see, I'm learning.
Funny story with DuckDuckGo. Previously, I worked at a web development agency, and we had a particular colleague who was very anti Google, and he stole my phone one lunchtime and installed DuckDuckGo as my browser on my mobile. 4 years it took me to work out how to change it back to Google. For 4 years, I would open my browser on my phone, and in DuckDuckGo, I would search Google first, and then start my searches from there. So
well, I mean, it's a funny one when we talk about all of the other search engines out there. It's so easy to default to say it's because Google does this, and like I say, in reality, there are plenty of other things that are also being used here. And even though Google's market share is massive, I think it's last time I looked, 2022, it was something like 85% of people are still using Google as their main search engine. There have been plenty of other things that have come along, though, and changed that. So even TikTok is a great example. It's quite new as a platform. It definitely wasn't intended as a sort of search engine when it came out, but because people are creating content that's helpful on there, like how-to videos, quick hacks, that kind of thing, more and more people are using it as a search engine. So DuckDuckGo, it's still going from strength to strength. And the 4 years that it was stuck on your phone, that was 4 years that your data was secure at the very least. So you've got that going for you.
This is true.
It's for all of its enormity, that market share is getting taken away from Google slightly, but it's still massive. I mean, when you look at that on the scale of the number of searches every day, it's still totally dominates everything. So when we look at SEO, we primarily optimize things in line with Google's best practice, which, just by the way that DuckDuckGo works, the way that Bing works as well, there are going to be some changes here and there because they've all got their own algorithm, they've all got their own way of showing it. But fundamentally, what's good for Google is usually good for other ones as well. Partly because there has been a lot of copying Google's homework going on with other people wanting to make their own search engines. So I'm sure that has factored into it quite a lot. But they've, in recent years, some of the other players, like Bing in particular, they've really tried to hone their niche and do things that Google doesn't. And if you actually look at them as a platform on their own, they've got some great features on there. But again, a few years ago, if you were looking at some of the tools that came as part of it, like the Bing equivalent of Search Console for Google, that was almost, and I'm sure any developers that may hear this, it wasn't stolen from Google. They looked very similar.
So, Jamie, hypothetical for you. We get a client come to us. They spend a lot of money and a lot of time and effort on a very shiny new website. It's loaded to the brim with copy, images, but it's been 6 months since they've launched it. And it's not ranking for anything they want to be showing for. Where do they start? Where would we suggest that they sort of kick things off?
Well, I mean, we take a two-prong approach, and historically SEO has kind of been split between the content and the technical. So that's actually a pretty good place to start. If a website's not had much traffic or any traffic in 6 months since they set up, usually that will either be on a technical level, there's something quite wrong with it, in which case we would, check things like, has the website actually been set up in such a way it's telling search engines not to find it, which is a big one, but usually a pretty simple fix. I mean, that can just be a checkbox. It's just knowing whether or not that's the case. From the content side of it, more often than not, that will be the reason that there is something preventing it appearing on Google. And there's a sort of a semi-understanding, I think, from a lot of people when they set up a website, that they know a website needs content for Google, but content is not all created equally. If it's not the right content, then it's not going to be found.
Yeah, so the days of just getting as much content on your site and updating as regularly as possible, it's quite an old way of thinking now in terms of content for SEO.
I think it always has been. I mean, there's I've had friends in the past say, I write a blog, why does no traffic come to it? And you say, what's the blog about? I say, it's about my daily life. And if no one is, unless you've got a stalker or a sniper following you, basically, no one is going to be looking for your specific daily life. So it's never going to get traffic from that point of view, unless, brand building and that kind of thing could do it, sure. But just from the point of view of people who don't know who you are, who don't know your brand, that kind of thing, just making sure that you've done a bit of research into what people are actually looking for in the first place, and then making sure you answer those questions. And that it doesn't need to be that every word on the website is spot on for what people are looking for. There are plenty of other things that come into that as well. So if, for example, it were an e-commerce website, say it was just an online shop, even if it was a local bookshop or something like that, and they had an online store that just did sales from that point of view, even just making sure that when you go onto pages, it's broken down in a way that makes sense. No one is ever going to buy anything from the website just Googling books. No idea what book I want to buy, just show me books. But if you were looking for like Jane Austen or non-fiction, that kind of thing, making sure it's bunched together in such a way that makes sense. If you have a page for Jane Austen and I don't know why I always go to Jane Austen, for example.
I mean, I'm here for it, Jamie. It's an author I know.
Okay.
No.
More of a Bronte man myself, but it's. I guess it works. That's another day. But if you had your Jane Austen page on your book website, and all of the products were deck chairs, parasols, those inflatable wavy arm people you see outside of car dealerships, that kind of thing. It's never going to rank for Jane Austen because search engines will be looking at that going, well, I feel this isn't really what people are looking for. So just stuff like that. You can't
fool Google, can you? There's
no
fooling Google. That's a mouthful.
No fooling Google. No fooging Goofle. But no, that's absolutely true. And again, I think part of the trick with SEO these days is, again, a lot of people do still think of SEO being the old style of SEO, where it was manipulating Google effectively to get what they want happening. But in reality, I think, a few things have happened. So partly Google are a bit more transparent about what they're doing now, so what we can do to feed into that. And it's also kind of set this precedent within the community of, even if something isn't against Google's guidelines now, there's a really good chance it might be in the future. Yeah. So anything that Google says don't do this, but you find it works, it might work now. Give it 3 months' time and a couple of algorithm updates, you might find those pages start tanking. So it really isn't a case of tricking Google and showing the right page, because even if you do, there's no point sending 20,000 people to a page if it's a page full of stuff they don't want anyway. You're never going to sell things. You're never going to get people getting in touch and engaging with your brand, really. So even if it did work from that point of view, there would be no real reason for a business to do it. So it's more about working with Google, working with the guidelines they've put out there, making sure that actually, if you have followed the guidelines, then there's a pretty good chance that the people that do come to your website are going to be more likely to make a purchase or whatever you want them to do on your website anyway, just because it's that much more helpful, the content that's brought them there.
Okay, so going back to our hypothetical, that content they fill the site with, that's not all waste, is it? That's usable, and there's other things outside of content as well that they can be doing?
Absolutely. So it's a pretty rare occasion that I've ever looked at a website and recommended we're going to need to start the website again from scratch.
Burn it down and start again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's as long as it's set up in such a way that the URLs are good, the pages themselves are laid out on a technical level, more often than not, it will be a case of going, okay, the content is usually pretty good, because it's pretty rare that someone will go into a business without really any idea of what the business does and how they do it. So it will usually, at least content can be written from a point of view of understanding and a certain amount of authority. A lot of the time it is just making sure that it works in layman's terms as well. So anyone who maybe isn't talking from the expert side of it, any questions that they might have, that kind of thing, just making sure that the user journey is there, making sure, even like an idiot's guide is taken care of these days, because there might well be people who have a vague understanding of, what they want to do, and they go to the website and it's just written on such a hugely technical level, you're actually not quite sure if it's what you want anymore, and it
can say a lot without saying much.
Yeah, it's like if you go to the mechanic and if you say to them, the problem is there's a knocking sound, and they will say it's the dorsal manifold catalytic converter.
Wait. I mean, I know it's not SEO, but
technically, is it jargon if I was just putting together terms that aren't technically a thing? But if they come back with a very, very detailed explanation of, it's the fourth piston is doing this and something, fundamentally, when you've brought it in there saying it's making a knocking noise, you probably don't care about all of that if they can fix it.
You just want the knocking noise.
You want the knocking noise gone, exactly. Yeah, so sometimes there is just a bit of a detachment in terms of what people are looking for, and even though the answer is technically the same thing, just marrying up the two, really. So that's probably how we'd look at some of the historic content that's on there already, just making sure that it is right for the audience. And again, on the technical level, you'll find this probably more often on old websites than on new ones, just because with new ones, there's not really been much of a chance for these problems to grow as the website gets older and more pages get added. But there can be things about internal linking, 404 pages, that kind of thing. But again, if it was a brand new website, less likely. But
yeah, I mean, we have been focusing on new sites and talking about new sites, but I guess it's the same if you flip it. You can't just launch a site into the world and then leave it for 2 years and then come back to it. So I guess a lot of what we're talking about applies as well to sites that have been launched into the world and then left to sort of their own devices for a while.
And the thing is as well, that it's a really good question. I mean, there are number of algorithm updates from Google every week, just small ones, and they're all going to have an impact on what pages appear for certain terms and that kind of thing. So we generally only focus on the the bigger algorithm updates, which happen, it can be 2 or 3 times a year, that kind of thing. They're usually the ones that Google give us some advance warning about and what's going to be changing. But if you've got a website that's been sat there for, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, sometimes it's not uncommon to see websites where they were set up 10 years ago. It's worked for me all this time. I don't really see much of a need to change it. But if you think about just how much search engines have changed in that time, it could have been, ticking every single box when it was launched. And now a few years later, I mean, even things that Google have introduced themselves and said, this is going to be a huge ranking factor, this is going to be amazing. Google have since made the search engine itself so advanced that it no longer relies on those things being done. So probably a quite good example of that is AMP pages that came out a few years ago, which were basically just those simplified versions of articles and blog pages, which it stripped out sort of some of the website identity, really, just to make almost like a newspaper. So you got some images, you got your links, you got your text, but it meant it would load a lot faster on mobile. And there was, when these first came out, Google absolutely prioritized those pages over just a traditional web page. But I think a combination of Google's understanding of pages, how it reads them, has changed a bit. Also, mobile phones and just mobile signals have come such a long way since then that it doesn't really save you that much time. So Google have changed that. So again, it was something that you could have put all of your money and so much time into it a couple of years ago, making sure all of those pages did that, loaded as AMP pages. But now it would be literally no benefit over a page that doesn't have that. And that's the thing. The irony there being, it could be an older website that didn't have the AMP pages, but the content was slightly better. Now, with them having not touched it, it could rank slightly better for those terms than the people that did set up AMP pages back then. So you can't really guarantee, but this is sort of why it's not a one and done thing. It's always changing, and there are always going to be things here and there that Google looks out for that might be more or less relevant depending on the year and what Google's thinking is that day.
So Jamie, you just touched on this, but some of the channels we offer here at Peaky can be more reactive. We can scale things up, we can up budgets quite quickly, we can gain some quite big returns quite quickly, but that's not the case for the SEO, is it? It's not a reactive channel.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a very limited number of situations where we could do something and see the impact of that overnight. So usually it will be if there's been a penalty put on a website by Google, making sure the work is done there to remove that penalty. That you would generally see happening quite quickly, but nothing near as beneficial as, say, running a PPC campaign or a social media campaign, that kind of thing. But the caveat to that is a lot of the work that is done for SEO in particular. Once it's done, if you've got the bare bones of the website set up in such a way it's easily crawlable, if you've got good content, then you don't really have to put too much effort into those pages again to see returns, see traffic, see purchases coming through month after month after month. And then really it's just going to be a case of going in and tweaking things, making sure it's still all relative, all up to date. So if you were, not just for us as an agency, but if you were working in-house and you were either the SEO specialist or someone who wanted to take it on a bit, it's one of those ones where really the only cost of it is your own time involved, which is certainly not to say that people shouldn't count their time as valuable, because it is free as long as you put literally no value to your time. So I'm inclined not to suggest people do that. But it is one of those things where if you compare it to, a small PPC campaign could be £500 a month, say, for a well-written, well-researched blog, for example, that is just, it could be a few hours, it could be half a day, something like that. And you can see traffic coming into that one page year after year after year. And from that point of view, it's sure there's going to be a couple of months while it's waiting for Google to index it.
It's more of an
and rank
investment piece, as it were.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the thing. When it is ranked well and when it is working like that, you pretty soon don't really pay any attention to the first couple of months where it wasn't doing anything. It's just when you see the graph in analytics going up and more traffic coming through to it.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely not a reactive one, but at the same time, it's not really intended to be. It's always going to be at the whim of search engines, how quickly they can crawl websites, how quickly they change their internal rankings and that kind of thing. I mean, it could even be a case in the future that it does become an overnight thing. And the moment you make a change, the technology gets so advanced that it crawls every website and every page in the world overnight. And it's, you look at the leaderboards for next day and go, hey, I'm doing better than I was yesterday. My thought on that would be I wouldn't necessarily put money on that happening anytime soon, because it's every time Google puts out any information about how they crawl websites and things like that. I mean, I don't feel bad for them in the sense that they're hard up for money or anything. They are one of the biggest companies on the planet. But it does seem like a pretty big job when you think about, they have to check every page on the internet effectively and do it accordingly. So obviously it's going to take some time from that point of view. But we do always find that for businesses that do want to see a quick return, I mean, if you're looking at your marketing as a whole and not just on a channel basis, that is one of the great reasons why you would have several channels working on the go. I mean, I've seen businesses recently where, they've been super hot on their PR and their social media and things like that. And, whoever they've got doing it is clearly a whiz at that. But then you look at the other sides of it and the website has no consideration for SEO and that kind of thing. And it's, if they did have a bit more thought into the content, a bit more into, say, UX and conversion rate optimization, then they'd really get it working for them.
Because really, the PPC campaigns, the paid social, they're driving people to the website. So I guess, the landing pages they're coming to need to be sort of up to scratch, as it were. But then also, once we've brought that traffic to the website, it's over really to the website to do its work from there. Absolutely. So to be able to create an environment in which people can easily navigate throughout a site, go through a checkout process and just get what they need. Because we've all done it where we've gone onto a website and you've not had that journey and you click off, and I lose interest so quickly. If something's not how I'm expecting it to be, then I'm gone. I'll find somewhere else where I can get it easier.
And I think this is the worst thing about actually working in marketing and working in SEO. It's when you see a bad checkout process, or when you go to try and buy something from a website and there's a blocker that stops you actually making a purchase. It's not just disappointing, it makes me angry, because I think I'm literally trying to give you my money.
Why don't you want my money?
You're leaving money on the table, and now I'm going to have to take it somewhere else, and I already decided I wanted to buy it from you, and now I'll probably never buy from them again. And that's obviously a bit of an exaggeration, but that is how most people will view it, even if they're not marketing nerds and just are trying to get on with their day and trying to buy Jane Austen books on the internet. But yeah, it is a good way to burn bridges. That is just, even if you have done everything else right, just if the thing you're doing is sending people to your website, then there needs to be some consideration for what you want people to do there. And at that point, if you're looking at the content, if you're looking at the user experience and conversion rate optimization, really it only makes sense to think about SEO at the same time, because then you've just got a whole other stream of traffic coming through and more income. And it's, I've worked with businesses in the past where the way they were set up was PPC had been their sole driver of revenue. But because it was such a competitive industry that they worked in, the cost per click and the cost per acquisition was so high. And, there have been some instances where they make a nominal loss on the individual sale anyway. So by the time they've got someone through PPC, got the first sale, they have lost about £10-15 per customer. Yeah. So when you introduce SEO to them, if you actually save 50-60 quid per person that actually becomes a customer, then that's when it actually becomes profit as well. So I think that is one of the things that I do really quite like about SEO is it doesn't matter if it is, a multinational corporation. It doesn't matter if it is a small bricks and mortar shop in town.
Yeah.
There is something that you can do that will make a huge difference fundamentally. And whether that does mean working with an agency and getting stuff done at a huge scale, whether it is, doing technical things for you, or whether it is just, having somebody in-house training up a bit and sort of learning the ropes of it, there is stuff that can be done.
So for those who are in-house looking to upskill, or maybe for those smaller businesses we're talking about that haven't got the budget to bring on agencies, where do we suggest they start? Like, what's the first thing they should sort of really address when it comes to their SEO?
That is a really good question. And maybe this is showing, again, my content background more than my technical side of it. But I really do think it can't be overstated how important content is to a website when we're trying to improve SEO. And I think that the main reason I say that is because it doesn't matter if your website is, scoring 100% through any of the programs that we might use to test technical scores, or if we're looking through ourselves. It doesn't matter how good your website is from that point of view. If the content isn't good, then you're not going to be answering anyone's questions. You're not going to be providing a solution to anyone. So you're not going to get ranked in search engine results for that anyway. So again, whether that is content as in writing, whether it's video content, it's making sure that your website fundamentally is the answer to someone's question. Now, there's always going to be stuff that writers will always be useful for SEO. So even if
our team would say that,
well,
we have a lot of writers.
We
on
our
SEO team.
We're very lucky. We have a lot of very good writers.
Very biased opinion on
We do have a bit of a biased opinion on that one, but again, it's even if in that scenario you did have a perfect technical website. There's always additional content that can be written, whether it is blogs, whether it is thought pieces, that kind of thing. Yeah. So you will never sort of lose a good investment on getting a good writer in there. Probably the more difficult thing about that is technical SEO kind of can be taught really, but being a good writer is just something that is way harder to get people that are actually good at it on that kind of level. So it's, I say only, quick tip is be good at writing. Okay. But the reality of it is, it's very difficult to be good at writing. So, that would be the simplest thing. The other suggestion I would say is, have a look at your mobile version of the site. Have a look at not the desktop version that you might see on a work laptop. Get it up on your mobile as well, because most of the people coming to your website these days are probably on a mobile device. Now, the issue for the people that work in a business, of course, is if they have a work laptop, if there's a desktop in the back room or something like that, they're only ever really seeing the website in that version, which, again, might look totally different to when people get it up on a mobile. So, go through on a mobile, try and break the website a bit, see if you do come up against any issues, and then that in itself is quite a good one from the technical and UX side of it. And I guess the only other one I would really suggest for, purely for the price of free, just if anyone was really looking at building up their own website like this, try and forget your website a bit. Try and forget how well you know it. Even if it's, get a family or friend or someone to look at it with totally new eyes. Yeah. If you have to say to them, navigate to this page, or if you want to find this thing on the website, and you have to say, no, you have to click the thing up there, and no, there's a thing down there you have to do. It's probably not the best design anyway, which is probably more of a user experience recommendation than it is an SEO one. But at the same time, there is that relationship of, well, this is the way that Google is going to be crawling it as well. So if it's a bit confusing how you have to get from one page to the next, then yeah, that's certainly not going to be doing you any favours.
It reminds me a little bit of when I was younger, for proofreading. People used to suggest you read things backwards because otherwise you're so used to looking at it and you've been rewriting it, rereading it so many times that you're skimming it, you're not actually looking at the word as an individual word to check it. So I guess it's a bit like that, isn't it? When we've all done it with websites that we frequent a lot, it becomes second nature. So if you're used to being on that site and working on that site on a regular basis, you're not going to pick up on the same sort of issues as maybe someone who's visiting for the first time or is a little less tech savvy.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it is definitely one of the strong suits of an agency is if you want an unbiased opinion of things that do need to be changed on the website, you do get a lot of fresh eyes there.
That's where we start, isn't it? We start, whatever channel we take on, we start with an audit. We have a really good look at everything and sort of really break it down to its basics and what it is.
And like you say, it's you can look at a page so many times. I mean, I think Amazon's actually a great example of that. I think we forgive a lot of Amazon's website because we know it's Amazon, it's huge. If you look at it on a sort of fundamental user point of view, it's pretty ugly and it's pretty bad to use if you are clicking through for results pages and that kind of thing. It works, I think, because we allow it to work more than it's the best designed website out there. And that's the thing. Sometimes it's smaller websites that have some of the best innovation on them and make it easier to make a purchase and to find stuff. And it's, I think Amazon being as big as it is, it gets away with that. But
ever tried looking for anything by lowest to highest price? Because that drives me spare. That's the worst thing about Google. Even if you've got it on like Prime or you just get all the garbage first pages and pages of it before you get to anything good.
Yeah, I think that's partly down to, well, one of the benefits of Amazon from their point of view is a lot of it is, I guess, technically user-generated content, really. So it's all of the sellers listing things on there. But as you mentioned, that then does have the issue of making sure people categorize things in the right place. I mean, one of my favorite websites is Reverb, which, like Amazon, but for secondhand musical equipment.
I'm well aware of that in my household.
Yeah, I thought it might be a dirty word, but if you look for Fender Stratocaster, something like that, exact same thing, price lowest to highest. I've not got a huge budget here. I want to see if anyone is selling one for cheap, and the first things that come up are 9 pages of screws and that kind of thing, just because someone put them in the electric guitar category rather than the, I guess, screws section of there. But again, you have to assume that for most of the users, that is absolutely not what they want. No one is going, I want the cheapest screws known to mankind. I was actually hoping to spend a bit more money and get a whole guitar in return. Yeah. But again, that's one of those things where it's almost become a bit of a household name, really. I mean, the fact that we've both come across this website, which on the face of it is tiny compared to Amazon. Yeah. But that's how it works. There might well be an update in the future that fixes that. But I think for both of them, it's the case that it's not really in their best interest to, because they're still making money at the end of the day.
Okay, so now looking ahead at what maybe the future holds, what do you think digital marketers are going to need to be aware of? What should be on our radar?
I think it's going to be a combination of things, really, because there is a lot of stuff that's happened in the last couple of years, which to me sort of implies that finally a lot of the bigger businesses that we work with, and I don't just mean Google, I mean some of the website builders themselves seem to be becoming more and more aware of the importance of SEO and things like that. So I actually think from a marketer's point of view, our job is going to be getting easier in a few years' time, or it's already started to. Like we saw an advert from Wix the other day where they were boasting about their core web vitals speeds and that kind of thing compared to WordPress, whereas in the past it was... if it's not right out of the box, then you're kind of stuck with it.
What you got,
exactly. There's only so much you can do. So I think it's going to be in the future easier for smaller businesses to get started, because a lot of that stuff might be done for them already. There's I guess at the moment with the current economic situation, there's always a question around, well, which channels are right now when faced with, not that Google's done anything different. There might just be slightly fewer people searching for certain terms and things like that. So there's always going to be something around preempting how we can take back some of the search volume from that, really make sure that people are still going through making purchases. And I guess from that point of view, it really is just making sure that the website is just leaving nothing to chance, really. So some of those blockers we were talking about a minute ago, making sure that the purchase system is as refined as possible. Make sure if there are people coming to your site trying to buy something, that we are not doing anything that's going to get in the way of that. And a really good tip that I've seen people recommending increasingly in the last year or so is that if your website has a search function, if you can, and I know some of the plugins for certain sites let you see what people have been searching for, that in itself is actually a good keyword research tool there to see what people are looking for. Does that need a page on its own? Is it giving the right results? That kind of thing. So I think most immediately that is probably going to be one of the most important things that people need to think about for the time being. Other than that, it's keep doing good work, basically. Keep on SEO.
Just keep at it and don't stop. So for those that have joined us before for our podcast, you will know that we like to round up with some quickfire questions. So Jamie, what's your hot take?
My industry hot take for SEO is that despite all of the algorithm updates and things that have happened over the years, at its core, I do think that a lot of the advice for SEO has remained the same, which, again, doesn't mean that a website from 10 years ago should be absolutely fine now. But at its principle, write things that people want to read, make sure your website is user-friendly, that kind of thing. Fundamentally, if things were set up with best practice in mind, even as far long ago as, say, 5 or 6 years ago, if the content is there, then that is the hardest battle really already won. So from that point of view, it's not as much about Google doing all these updates every week and we've got to change all the work we've ever done to every website to make sure that it works. It's if you do it right the first time, then that will at least buy you some time afterwards that you'll still be getting the benefit from it.
And what change, if any, would you like to see in the industry as we move forwards?
Well, this is it's one that I sort of suspect might already be happening based on a couple of conversations I've heard and been part of over the last year or so. But really, one of the ways that you can tell when Google is about to concentrate on something is when they've left it alone for a while, when they've updated everything else but not this one thing. And for me, I think one thing that has been lagging behind a bit is concessions to accessibility for users, so people who might be hard of reading, people who might have other impairments, that kind of thing. At the moment, there are screen readers and things that will help people read a web page when it's loaded. At the moment, the only one that really comes to mind is image alt tags, which can have an SEO benefit if they're optimized, but they are fundamentally for people who are hard of reading, hard of vision. And there are a couple of other things there that if your website is crawlable, then yes, that should make it easy to read for a screen reader. But there are a couple of caveats to that. I mean, I didn't know until recently, but if you were to write a title tag in block capitals, as a lot of people do purely as a style thing, a lot of screen readers think it's an acronym, like HMRC, so they will read out each individual letter as a letter rather than as a word, which personally I think I would find infuriating.
Spelling it out to you.
Exactly.
Letter by letter.
And it strikes me that there are so many people out there that do rely on that kind of software that I think it's got to be something that, if not immediately, at some point in the future, search engines are going to have to spend a bit more time making things easier for people that do have those kind of disabilities. So again, it's one of those rare ones where it works, I think, both on the technical level and the user level. So yeah, I think it probably is a bit of a safe bet that they will show some extra consideration in the future. So that's what I'd like to see. It's also what I think will happen at some point. It's just going to be a case of when.
So, I mean, Alice on her Lunch and Learn recently with us was talking about accessibility,
Yeah.
and it's the purple pound, isn't it? I think so. It's, we were looking at the amount of money that businesses lose by not being accessible, whether or not that be websites or physical bricks and mortar premises. But businesses are missing out on thousands of pounds, millions, I think it is, across the board
Yeah.
on a daily basis by just not having accessibility as part of their sort of consideration for their business.
And this is the thing, that the business owners themselves, if it were in face or if they knew more about the individual people that were making purchases from them, they wouldn't, well, they would want to make sales as easy for everyone. I mean, it's not that they don't want to sell to these people, they just unwittingly are making it harder to make those purchases, which is the same thing, really. And again, it's just money being left on the table. So I think when it does become just that bit more, once it's a ranking factor, once it's something that Google does make a bit more important, then people are going to start to take a bit more notice industry-wide. And that's generally when you do see these changes start to happen. I mean, I guess slightly pessimistically, I think the reason why it's not a bit more commonplace at the moment is because, again, it's not been acknowledged by Google themselves as a ranking factor, which means for a lot of the SEO tools, the plugins, that kind of thing, there's not really anything there that says whether it's particularly good or bad. I guess the one exception to that would be the readability score on the Yoast plugin for WordPress, but even then, that's not always an entirely clear indicator. But again, I'm pretty hopeful that in the next couple of years it is going to be a bigger thing, and then we can all actually be more helpful to people out there that have been actually forgotten about for however many years.
Good one to watch this space on. So obviously, we've talked a lot about tips for people, things to be looking out for, places to start. But what would be your 3 tools that you would recommend that people should have in their arsenal for sort of starting work on their SEO?
I think for people just starting out, the 3 main ones that I recommend, and again, we're not paid by Google, so me saying Google 3 times is, I get no kickback off that. But Google Analytics, again, free to use, easy enough to install. It's going to give you really good insight into what pages people are going to on your website. And from that, you can make a bit of a plan of, well, why aren't they going to that one? Do I need to focus on this? And certainly as a business grows, it's invaluable. It's an essential one.
And would we suggest that as well as any sort of built-in analytics? So I think is it Squarespace, Shopify, they all come with their own sort of dashboards and their own version of analytics. Would we always recommend then that you have Google Analytics as well?
I think it's whatever works for people fundamentally. I mean, some of them do come with their limitations. So some of the ones built into site builders maybe don't let you see the sort of insights that analytics will give you. I know that HubSpot in particular does have some pretty excellent analytics stuff built into it as standard. It really does depend on what works for each person. If you are going to work with an agency, then Google Analytics is sort of industry standard, so it makes it easier from our point of view. But at the same time, if it would just for our benefit, I don't think we would necessarily recommend to a client that they do install it if what's working for them is working. But it's always worth having. It's the only drawback I would say to most of the ones that come with site builders, again, is just I'm yet to see anything that offers anywhere near the level of detail and the amount of information you can get from Google Analytics. So that's the first one. And then in tandem with that, I would say Search Console is almost the other side of a coin to analytics. So analytics shows you what people are doing once they get to your website. Search Console will show you sort of how they got to your website in the first place. So it's a really interesting one. Even if it's a reasonably new site, you can see where you're ranked for certain phrases, what sort of terms are people looking for to make your website come up fundamentally. And that's kind of then a case of, well, this is what I think my website does. is it actually appearing for that anywhere at all, or is it so far off page one, or is it not even ranked for it in the slightest? And then what do I need to do to get, it to appear for that keyword? So it's a good one from that point of view. And there's a lot of other, that's probably its party piece is the performance side of Search Console, but there are a lot of good mini tools in there as well that are useful for anyone that does want to see on a technical level what the site is doing. And then the final one is Google itself, which is, it seems so simple, but if you are in any doubt about whether you're going for the right keyword, just Googling it, seeing what comes up. And Google Images is a really good one as well, because it uses part of the same algorithm. If you're not sure if the keyword is right, just see what Images is showing. Then you get a very visual thing of, is this actually the thing I'm looking for or not? It's harder, obviously, if you're looking for like maths answers or something like that, because not a very visual thing. But in the past, I've been working with businesses who have been doing like coaching, like one-to-one coaching, and the difficulty with Google was a lot of those keywords it thought were like coach companies, like Megabus, that kind of thing. So a lot of the time it was just sense checking. Is this keyword right for us before we start bidding on it in PPC and optimizing the site for it? Or are people going to start calling the phone and saying, are you going to London, and, are you still doing the pound offer, that kind of thing? So I think of all of them, even though it's the one that we spend the most time trying to appease almost, it is also probably the one most useful to us. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, Jamie, to finish us off, the other big question, obviously, what is SEO is the first one. Chrome or Internet Explorer?
I don't want you to think that me thinking about this is a difficult one to answer. It's Chrome all day long, but there are, I guess, reasons to use, it's Edge these days rather than Internet Explorer.
It is.
I have enough faith in Edge that I'm sure there are many good reasons for using it.
You just can't think of any?
I can't off the top of my head, no. I mean, time was a few years ago that I think Internet Explorer was about 10% of the web browser market. And again, the only reason it was as high as it was, I remember talking to another agency owner about this a while ago, and he did a bit of research and said most of that is down to it being the search, it being the web browser installed on people's phones and laptops, and a lot of them not knowing how to change it. When that is where a lot of your user base is coming from, then... But, there, at least these days, you do get the option when you get a new computer. You are given the option. I think they all have their drawbacks. They all have, strengths and weaknesses. I mean, Chrome famously is a slightly more taxing one for computers to run. It is a memory hoarder.
Does that mean it's not good that I've got about 25 tabs at any given time?
I
know I make people very uncomfortable with the amount of tabs I have open in my Chrome.
It's hard to answer this one without just being incredibly contradictory for also having 25 Chrome tabs open. I've not read anywhere that it's a good thing you should try and do. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Noted for future.
But, there are also other perfectly good... browsers out there. So Firefox is a popular one, and again, that's one that has been going for ages and ages. And even the other day, I was reading, the latest iteration is better than Chrome. But I think Chrome it's quite a good one just because it is, you have all the plugins that you could ever need. I mean, the SEO ones in particular are great and very useful just in a day-to-day job. But it's also a handy one just, for if you have a Google account, just being able to sign in everywhere and being able to access all of those sheets and stuff. It is very useful. It's probably the best thing that Google have done since Google, I would argue.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
Can I say congrats? We have not needed the jargon bell once.
I'm astonished.
So-
I think we need to reshoot because I was going to use a lot more jargon.
I am pleased because it means I have fully understood. So, congrats, Jamie. You have successfully avoided the bell. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again soon.